On the 13th of June 2026, something strange happened. Football fans watching the World Cup noticed something odd. The FIFA president, Gianni Infantino, appeared on the big screen at two different stadiums. At the same time, in two different cities. Hundreds of miles apart. Social media went into meltdown. The memes wrote themselves. Was he teleporting? Did FIFA clone their president? Was this some kind of elaborate deepfake? The reality was almost more extraordinary. Infantino had pledged publicly on social media to attend as many World Cup games as physically possible, 2 per day if he could manage it, across 3 countries, 4 time zones, 16 stadiums, some of them nearly 3,000 miles apart, and he's been keeping that promise. In the first 2 weeks of this World Cup alone, Gianni Infantino traveled over 24,000 miles. That's roughly the circumference of the Earth. And every single mile was flown on a private jet, paid for, not by FIFA, but by one of its most controversial sponsors. This is the story of the most well-traveled man at the 2026 World Cup, and what his schedule tells us about the real business of football. To understand why this matters, you need to understand who Gianni Infantino is and how he got here. Born in Switzerland to Italian immigrant parents, Infantino grew up in the small town of Brig before studying law in Fribourg and Brussels. He worked his way up through UEFA, European football's governing body, eventually becoming its general secretary before running for FIFA president in 2016. He won on a platform of reform. In 2023, he was re-elected unopposed to a 3rd term. FIFA was in crisis, the corruption scandal that brought down his predecessor, Sepp Blatter, had shaken the organization to its core. Infantino promised transparency, accountability, and growth. A decade later, he has delivered on the growth. Whether he's delivered on the rest is a matter of significant debate. Under his watch, FIFA's revenues have more than doubled. The World Cup expanded from 32 to 48 teams. A new Club World Cup was launched. Commercial deals multiplied. He's now moved his family from Switzerland to Riyadh, the Saudi capital, Santuair, which raised eyebrows given FIFA's growing commercial relationship with Saudi Arabia. And at this World Cup, he has made himself the most visible, non-playing figure in the entire tournament. Which raises an obvious question. Why? Let's track what Infantino has actually been doing. The World Cup opened on the 11th of June at the Azteca Stadium in Mexico City. Infantino was there, center stage at the opening ceremony, alongside Mexico's president. Hours later, he was in Guadalajara for South Korea versus Czechia. The next day, he was in Los Angeles for the United States' opening game against Paraguay. Then San Francisco, then Vancouver, then back to the United States, then Mexico again. In one single day, the 18th of June, he flew from Mexico City to Vancouver, a journey of over 2,400 miles, to attend 2 matches in a single day. The following day, he flew over 4,000 miles from Vancouver to Boston, then on to Philadelphia the same evening. Over the first 14 days, he attended 25 matches and FIFA events. He covered 24,135 miles. Friends of Infantino told reporters he had stopped living in any time zone. At Qatar 2022, where all the stadiums were within an hour of each other, Infantino attended all 64 matches. This World Cup spans a continent, and he's still trying. None of this is possible without one thing: a private jet. Not just any private jet. A luxury aircraft provided to Infantino by Qatar Airways, Manto, as a value-in-kind component of Qatar's sponsorship deal with FIFA. Let that sink in for a moment. Qatar, the country that hosted the last World Cup. The country that has invested hundreds of billions of dollars in sports washings and global influence through football. the country that owns Paris Saint-Germain, the country that joined this World Cup as Aramco's sister sponsor. Qatar is personally flying the FIFA president around North America on a private jet. FIFA's official statement described the arrangement as cost-effective and efficient. Environmental groups were less diplomatic. The New Weather Institute labeled the 2026 World Cup the most polluting sporting event ever staged, estimating it will generate around 9 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Air travel alone accounts for nearly 8 million tons of that figure, more than 4 times the average of World Cups between 2010 and 2022. And as Infantino racks up more flights than any other individual at the tournament, the environmental cost of his schedule keeps climbing. So why is he really doing it? The official line is passion, love of the game, a desire to be present, to connect with fans, to represent football's governing body at the tournament it created. And there may be truth in that, but there's a harder-edged business logic at work too. Every match Infantino attends gives him access to the most powerful people in world sport. The hospitality boxes at a World Cup aren't just seats. They're deal rooms. Government ministers, billionaire owners, broadcast executives, sovereign wealth fund representatives. Being at every game means being in every room. And in Infantino's world, being in the room is everything. Consider his schedule more carefully. When he skipped a match to fly from Vancouver to Miami, it wasn't to watch football. It was to address FIFA members at the Executive Football Summit held at the Ritz-Carlton South Beach. His attendance at matches involving smaller nations, Cape Verde, Uzbekistan, Haiti, isn't random. It's deliberate visibility, a signal to the smaller federations that FIFA's president sees them, values them. Those federations vote. Their loyalty matters. Every handshake with a national team coach, every photo with a Cape Verde goalkeeper's mother, every address to FIFA members at a luxury hotel. These are the real moves. The football is the backdrop. Step back, and Infantino's World Cup schedule is a perfect microcosm of how FIFA operates. The organization presents itself as the guardian of the world's game, the protector of football's values, the body that exists to serve the sport. But watch closely enough. Track the flights, follow the deals, look at who's in the room, and a different picture emerges. FIFA is a power structure, and its president understands better than almost anyone alive how power actually works. You show up, you're visible. You make people feel seen. You build obligations. You collect favors. 24,000 miles in 2 weeks isn't passion, it's politics. And the private jet? That's not a perk, that's infrastructure. Right, you stayed until the end, so here it is. Based on routes tracked by ESPN and other outlets, Infantino has spent an estimated 38 to 42 hours in the air during the first 2 weeks of this World Cup alone. That's nearly 2 full days, airborne. On a private jet provided by Qatar. The tournament runs until the 19th of July. He's not stopping. By the time Gianni Infantino watches the final at the New York, New Jersey Stadium, he will have spent the equivalent of 3 to 4 full working weeks in the air, watching football, or, depending on how you look at it, doing business. The story of Infantino's World Cup is really the story of modern football in miniature. Spectacle on the surface, strategy underneath. A man who loves the game, who also understands that the game is a business, and that in business, showing up is half the battle. Whether you admire that or find it troubling probably depends on what you think football is for. We'll let you decide. If this breakdown gave you a different way of looking at the World Cup, subscribe to Pitch Deck Report. Every week, we find the story behind the scoreline. See you next time.